A kind family hired a troubled yet alluring woman as their maid who ended up changing their lives. In 1971, Buddy drives back to Glenville, Georgia to visit his father. Seeing his childhood home, he suddenly feels nostalgic as he gazes at the bridge over the river. He recalls an old family friend who once lived with him, the first woman he ever loved outside his family. However, his dad despised her because she always caused trouble. When he was 13, Buddy saw a captivating woman crossing the bridge and walking toward their house. She introduced herself as Rose, who came to live with them as the family maid. Buddy quickly entered the house and told his mother, Mrs. Hillyer, who was wearing a hearing aid. When she asked for his impression of the woman, the teenager described her as tall and girlish. Following this, the delighted mom introduced Rose to her two other children, Doll and Wasky. Just then, the head of the family, Willcox, arrived. He welcomed Rose, praising her grace and expressing confidence in her skills despite her challenging experiences in Birmingham. Intrigued, Buddy couldn't help but wonder more about her background. The next day, Rose played the harmonica for the kids by the river while Buddy watched from afar, increasingly curious about her. Later, while the children were in the kitchen, Rose asked Buddy about the hotel their family managed. In response, the teenager explained that his mother, orphaned at a young age, inherited the property. Suddenly, Buddy asked Rose about her experiences in Birmingham. Though she tried to dodge the question, the teenager guessed she was hired by his father to help her escape a life of courtesanship. Later, Willcox came home for lunch and asked Rose for coffee. After praising her service, he playfully spanked her, making her run off. Witnessing this reaction, Mrs. Hillyer suspected the maid felt unwell, but Buddy commented, implying that it had to do with her helper's apparent infatuation with his dad. While sweeping the backyard the next day, Rose noticed Mrs. Hillyer studying, prompting her to be curious. Upon learning she was about to complete her master's degree, the maid admired her more. When Mrs. Hillyer also revealed she was orphaned at 7, the helper felt a deeper connection with her, having been orphaned herself. As this happened, the children watched from the treehouse. Doll remarked that their mother hadn't noticed Rose's crush on their father. Buddy suggested it might be because their mother's maternal instincts were stronger than malice. Later during lunch, Rose used beans to play He Loves Me Not while glancing at Willcox, which Doll noticed. When she accidentally spilt them, Mrs. Hillyer quickly checked on her, but the maid assured her she was okay. Afterward, Mrs. Hillyer suddenly remembered her magazine presentation. Willcox insisted on driving her to the venue, but she refused, suggesting he stay home and help the maid with the dishes. After their mother left, Buddy and Doll secretly watched their father and the maid in the dining room. They saw Rose trying to kiss him, confessing her romantic feelings. However, Willcox rejected her advances, advising her to calm down and talk things through. Despite this, Rose insisted he kiss her just once, prompting him to give in. As things were about to get steamy, Willcox stopped and confronted Rose, accusing her of alluring him without considering the impact on his wife. After instructing the maid to wash the dishes, he exited the dining room door, prompting his children to run. Later, Doll and Buddy discussed what they witnessed. While she believed their dad genuinely rejected Rose, her brother suspected he did it out of fear. Afterward, Buddy went to his room to read his comics. While he was in bed, a devastated Rose unexpectedly arrived, asking to lie beside him for a while. After the teenager allowed her to join him, the maid opened up about her heartbreak and confessed her love for his father. When Buddy asked how she fell in love, Rose explained it began when Willcox complimented her on her first day. Taking advantage of the maid's vulnerable state, the curious teenager started touching her inappropriately. She then rejected his advances, reminding him he was too young to be interested in such things. Despite this, he insisted that he wanted to explore her body, and she eventually allowed him. Meanwhile, Willcox awoke in the middle of the night. When his wife worried, he explained that the great slump had him thinking about its devastating effects on people. To comfort himself, he prepared a glass of milk. Realizing what she'd done with Buddy, Rose felt awful and asked him not to tell anyone. After he promised, she rushed out ashamed. However, upon returning to her room, Rose stared at herself in the mirror, which caused her to feel increasingly worried. She then woke Buddy, begging him to keep it a secret. She feared that if people found out, she would be blamed, not him. Buddy suspected Rose's request was linked to her background as a courtesan. However, the maid clarified it wasn't about her past. She loved being with their family and feared being kicked out if they discovered what had happened. The teenager understood and promised not to tell, expressing his love for her. After the maid thanked and hugged him, she revealed her plan to move on and find the right guy on her day off. The following day, Buddy woke up late, prompting Mrs. Hillyer to scold him and ask what he had been doing. He then lied, responding that he had been reading inappropriate comic books Willcox all night. His mother then expressed her disappointment and fed him with castor oil to cleanse his poisoned mind. Just then, Rose flaunted her outfit before leaving the house. Mrs. Hillyer and the kids admired her stylish look, but Willcox thought her clothes were provocative. Still, he and Buddy took her to town later. As Rose walked, her beauty caught the attention of several gentlemen. Meanwhile, Willcox and Buddy continued to follow her without her knowledge, watching as she successfully made a move on a salesman. That evening, Willcox told his wife how much Rose bothered him, admitting that having the maid around felt tedious. However, Mrs. Hillyer only defended Rose, saying she was anything but tedious. As they spoke, Rose suddenly arrived home from her date. Further in their conversation, Willcox remarked that their maid's look made her resemble a provocative character. However, Mrs. Hillyer insisted that Willcox should appreciate Rose's efforts to look beautiful and not be so cynical. As their argument escalated, Mrs. Hillyer felt disrespected by her husband's contradictions. Willcox whispered into her hearing aid, expressing his love and respect for her, leading to their reconciliation. With the tension gone, Mrs. Hillyer calmly explained that Rose wore showy clothes to seek affection. Although Willcox was concerned that Rose seemed to love everyone, Mrs. Hillyer defended it as a positive trait. After their discussion, the couple kissed. The next morning, while digging in the yard, Mrs. Hillyer spotted a scruffy man, which frightened her. She ran to the kitchen and reported it to Rose, who claimed she didn't know the man. In a panic, Mrs. Hillyer called her husband, who rushed home. Willcox then chased the man, who had escaped by swimming in the river and left his hat behind. Willcox picked up the headwear and tossed it to Rose. Noticing her smile, the family became suspicious, but the maid quickly became defensive, insisting she didn't know the man. That evening, Doll complained to Buddy about Rose's cluelessness about what was happening around her. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the sound of men fighting outside the house. The siblings went outside and saw a brawl between two men in the yard. Meanwhile, their father, having heard the commotion, grabbed his rifle and threatened them, causing them to flee. Once the men were gone, he looked at Rose's window and saw her shadow. The next morning, as the maid served drinks to the family, Willcox mentioned that his sleep had been interrupted and asked about hers. In response, Rose confirmed she had heard strange voices the previous night. Annoyed, Willcox accused Rose of pretending to be innocent, insisting she knew the two men had been fighting over her. When he threatened to terminate her, the maid firmly defended her claim, asserting she didn't know either. Feeling the tension, Mrs. Hillyer intervened, arguing that it was natural for Rose to get suitors and she shouldn't be fired for it. Willcox then explained to his wife that he didn't intend to fire Rose but advised the maid not to test his patience, emphasizing that they had growing children in the house. Hearing this, Rose promised to tell the men to stay away from the house, revealing that she had lied earlier and actually knew them. Later, Willcox took his son to the hotel for a billiards game. Their moment was interrupted when a staff member informed him that the police chief was on the telephone. After hearing the news, Buddy and Willcox went to the police station where the maid was locked up. The officer explained that a man who admired Rose had nearly ended someone's life over her and that she had bitten a policeman's thumb down to the bone. However, the injured cop, David, interjected, believing the woman might have been upset and hadn't intended to hurt him. Rose agreed with the police, insisting she bit him unintentionally because she was ill. Hearing this, Willcox disagreed, pointing out that the maid was healthy. Regardless, the chief released her, leaving him with no choice but to take her home. Before stepping out of the vehicle, Rose swore she hadn't meant to bite the cop. Despite her explanation, Willcox said he'd return to the hotel and talk to her later. Afterward, Buddy and the maid braved the heavy downpour, running towards the house. Later, while playing Chinese checkers, Doll worried about what would happen to Rose. Buddy, also curious, secretly listened to their parents' conversation to know their decision. The teenager overheard his mother defending Rose, arguing that her intentions were good despite the biting incident. Sensing someone was listening, Willcox walked towards the door, causing Buddy to run to avoid getting caught. Once his dad returned to the room, the teenager returned to his spot to continue eavesdropping. Buddy heard his mom telling his dad that Rose wasn't a bad influence, highlighting her loving nature. She defended that the maid attracted many men because of her big heart, not her appearance. Despite this, Willcox remained firm, insisting that Rose should be immediately terminated for causing trouble. Respecting the decision, Mrs. Hillyer volunteered to relay it to the maid. As she exited the room, Buddy ran to the living living area to inform his siblings about what would happen next. Upon learning that Rose would be terminated, Dahl argued that even though their maid bit a policeman's thumb, it wasn't a good reason to fire her. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hillyer went to Rose's room only to discover she had a high fever. Worried, she promptly called an ambulance which arrived shortly after. As Rose was placed on the stretcher, she insisted she didn't need to go to the hospital, fearing she would only expire there. However, Mrs. Hillyer and her children comforted her, promising she would get better with treatment. After the maid was taken to the ambulance, Mrs. Hillyer asked her children to join her praying for Rose. Later, the family visited Rose in the hospital and learned she was suffering from a bad case of pneumonia. Despite this, Dr. Martinson praised the patient's strength, noting that it had helped her survive the severe illness. Days later, the family brought Rose home to recover. While eating on a rainy day, the maid told Buddy how kind the doctor was, revealing that he had once had tears in his eyes just from listening to her heartbeat. Hearing this, Buddy expressed doubts about the doctor, a sentiment his father shared. Later, Dr. Martinson arrived to check on Rose's condition. During dinner, Willcox grew uncomfortable, realizing that the doctor was taking too long inside the maid's room. Mrs. Hillyer then reassured him that Dr. Martinson was a skilled professional. Worried, Buddy and his father stood up to check on Rose. They encountered the doctor on the stairs who had just finished the checkup and reported that the maid was improving. Despite this, the father and son looked at him suspiciously as he left the house. The next day, the family attended mass with Rose, who seemed to have finally changed her promiscuous ways. However, one day, Willcox caught her bringing a man named Billy into their home. Rose then explained that the man was a good guy and wanted to marry her, but she couldn't because he was poor and unemployed. Despite her explanation, Willcox was upset and searched for Billy's clothes to throw them outside. Rose continued to defend herself, pleading not to be fired. However, he wasn't convinced and fired her immediately, demanding she pack her bags. The next morning, Willcox excitedly told Rose he had found her a job in Tennessee. However, when the maid learned it was a job at a dairy establishment, she suddenly cried. Mrs. Hillyer then scolded her husband for making the maid relive her troubled past. Though Willcox clarified it wasn't the same farm she had grown up on, the crying Rose explained she didn't want to raise a child on a farm, disclosing that she was pregnant. Hearing this, Willcox felt disappointed, fearing that the dairy establishment employer would likely reject Rose due to her pregnancy. Mrs. Hillyer confronted the crying Rose and asked who the child's father was. The woman revealed the man was out of town and hadn't left a forwarding address. Willcox then started doubting if she was telling the truth, but Rose insisted that she was really having a child, sharing that she hadn't had her period in 3 months and her stomach was getting big. Unconvinced, Willcox demanded that Rose lift her dress to prove her pregnancy. Despite Mrs. Hillyer's shock at the inappropriate request, her husband insisted, assuring her that Rose only needed to show her belly. The maid complied, revealing her bump. Still doubtful, the couple took Rose to the hospital for confirmation, only to find out that she had an ovarian cyst, not a pregnancy. Aside from that, Dr. Martinson revealed that Rose actually had untreated gonorrhea, which resulted in her never having children. Upon learning this, Mrs. Hillyer felt a deep sympathy for Rose. Further in their conversation, the doctor recommended a radical complete hysterectomy for Rose, explaining that it would involve removing her womb and both ovaries. He noted that the procedure could result in a less feminine appearance and reduce her promiscuity. When Mrs. Hillyer showed confusion, the doctor clarified that aside from the ovarian cyst, Rose was an extreme psychoneurotic with uncontrolled impulses. He suggested that removing the second ovary would spare Rose from the suffering she caused herself and others. When Willcox agreed to spay the maid, Mrs. Hillyer objected, calling it sinful. She persuaded her husband to reconsider by reminding him of his thoughtful and kind nature. As a result, her spouse retracted his decision and chose not to remove Rose's womanhood. Following this, Mrs. Hillyer faced the doctor, insisting that the operation should only remove the ovarian cyst. The medical professional assured her that another surgeon would perform the procedure. After the surgery, Willcox informed his family that Rose's operation was successful and that she was finally doing well. When Rose returned home, she resumed her duties and promised to repay the hospital bills. Willcox, however, insisted that she needn't worry about the payment, even though she offered to work as a waitress to cover the cost. One afternoon, Rose confided in Buddy about her plans to leave. During their conversation, she revealed that she had run away from home at 14 and survived by working as a waitress. When Buddy asked about her family, Rose shared that her father was awful while her mother was as kind as Mrs. Hillyer but had passed away along with her sister from typhoid and tuberculosis. tuberculosis. Before they parted, she advised him that girls value love over physical moments. That night, after a lovely date with David, Rose was thrilled when he expressed a desire to see her again the next morning. She excitedly rushed inside to share the news with the Hillyer couple, revealing that she had found her Mr. Right, a policeman whose thumb she had bitten. Not long after, Rose married David and the Hillyers attended the ceremony. Following the reception, she said her heartfelt goodbyes, expressing her deep gratitude and love for the family. However, this deeply affected Buddy, who felt heartbroken after hugging her for the last time. On their way home, Willcox joked about how pleased he was to see Rose happy and finally out of their lives. Mrs. Hillyer laughed, acknowledging that Rose had found love but hoping she wasn't too overwhelming for David. When she asked Buddy about his opinion, the teenager couldn't respond because he was still crying. Presently, Buddy reflects on their former maid's journey, revealing that David wasn't her Mr. Right after all. It turned out that Rose had 4 more husbands before finally finding the right one, with whom she'd been married to for 25 years. Entering the house, Buddy calls for his father and finds him in the backyard. They speak on the porch where Willcox delivers the heartbreaking news that Rose has passed away. Overwhelmed with grief, Buddy cries, but his father offers comfort, reminding him that she lived a fulfilling life. As they gaze at the river, Willcox reassures his son that Rose will forever be in their hearts.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.